Other vulnerable groups are migrants and asylum seekers, incarcerated individuals, Afro-descendants, indigenous, and LGBTQ groups. In mid-April, a group of right-wing politicians from Spain and Latin America, spearheaded by Peruvian novelist Mario Vargas Llosa, released a declaration titled "The Pandemic Should Not Be a Pretext for Authoritarianism." The declaration reacted to the emergence of state interventionism, socialism, and populism by accusing many governments of taking measures that indefinitely restricted basic freedoms and rights. They saw any policy that restricted the free market as being authoritarian, even if such policies were instituted by democratic governments, institutions, and supported by majority of the population. The challenges presented by the pandemic have forced the actions and demands of social and human rights movements in the region to take on different shapes. One example are Cuba's solidarity brigades, groups of doctors sent to countries in crisis, such as Italy, very early on in the pandemic. The new forms of organizing have also emerged through social media, Twitter storms and virtual meetings, cacerolazos, the banging of pots and pans in protest, often from balconies and windows during COVID-19. Also, street demonstrations, adherence to social distancing, protesters wearing masks. The protests have become more present in the context of worsening health, social, and political conditions. Movements have organized, providing food and basic goods that are necessary for public health, contributing to collective organization, demanding effective solutions from governments. In Brazil, the landless workers' movement has delivered more than 1,200 tons of food to shantytowns and cities. In Argentina, organizations have demanded food and measures that guarantee assistance to poor neighborhoods. In Guatemala, El Salvador, and Ecuador, women hang white flags along the highway from their homes to symbolize widespread hunger and demand food. Amazonian departments in Colombia have also denounced the crisis beyond the cities. Organizations of indigenous peoples have denounced the dire situation, stating that there are, as of late May, at least 20,000 cases of the virus in the Amazon basin. In Chile, the Coordinadora Feminista has shed light on demanding urgent attention towards the need for the eradication of domestic violence and protection of women, children, and adolescents, demanding the right not to leave home to work during the pandemic, and the right to guarantee income and other health measures. So the expansion of the pandemic in Latin America has revealed the precariousness of the system of public health and the eroded conditions of life for the poor, the result of decades of neoliberal policies. Thus, the United Nations states that, quote, "the impact of the pandemic poses further challenges to democracy, heightening inequality and making differences between social groups more visible, which may reinforce the perception that democracy has failed to respond to the most urgent needs of vulnerable groups." End quote. The temporary measures introduced during the crisis, those limiting the exercise of human rights, may restrict the participation and mobilization of civil society and its capacity to hold governments accountable. Emergency measures may allow powerful interest groups to use the crisis to implement agendas otherwise opposed by civil society. Yet, as we have learned in this class, the fight for human rights progress in Latin America has prevailed through authoritarian periods, and social mobilizations are adapting and developing strategies to hold their governments accountable during the current crisis. In order to move forwards, not just in Latin America, but for the United States as well, there needs to not be a return to normal. The building of an effective exit to the crisis must be centered on a profound transformation of its true causes, economic and status inequality. And so we return to our guided questions. What does the fight for human rights in Latin America look like in the 21st century? How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the fight for human rights in Latin America? And what is the evidence for hope Catherine Sicking discusses, and how can we apply it to the struggle for human rights in the present? Your written response for the week is connected to this last question. So please make sure to read the prompt carefully and get through the readings.